this is a...
That is a burnout operation, which was done to burn off the fuels that surrounded some of the structures closer to the water area. So that was to keep the fuels away from the structures so we could control that in case the fire jumped over and approached those houses.
All right, and right now we're traveling north on...
Yeah, we're heading north on, close north on Bayou Heron Road.
Okay.
More like a northwesterly right now.
And this is a National Wildlife Refuge.
Yes, this is a Grand Bay National Wildlife Refuge, which is also part of, and Grand Bay NEAR, which is a National Estuary and Research Center, is part of it. So it's two national things together, but this is definitely National Wildlife Refuge property. And you can see the difference between the unburned fuels, which haven't been burned in close to, I think, 20 years is what I was told, and the burned area. This habitat's really adapted to having regular fire in the habitat. But due to fear of fire and dislike of fire for many years, people held fire off of these communities, and it builds up fuel very quickly, and it's just a time bomb waiting to happen, which is what we kind of had here. Is you can't stop wildfire. You can choose to either do a prescribed fire or you can end up with a wildfire. And fortunately, at the beginning of this wildfire, we had a prescribed fire in where we purposely set it to burn off some of the fuels and improve wildlife habitat. And when this wildfire was started, it actually hit that burned area and held it there for a good while. But eventually, with the wind conditions and the weather conditions, it crept around and was able to find fuels on the other side.
All right, and as we're traveling, on the left is that's unburned as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that's primarily unburned. If you go far enough back, you'll see some burned areas, but they were able to stop it further back in there.
And then on the right, this was a managed burn.
Yeah, that was a managed burn, a prescribed burn. Not the most ideal conditions, but to protect those structures, those people's homes back there, we wanted to make sure we can get in there and burn off as much fuel as we can to really protect people's homes and livelihoods.
All right. And now the situation you're dealing with tonight, low humidity, possible wind shift again. So what factors are you...
Yeah. We've been battling gusting winds of close to 20 miles per hour at night. That's really pushed the flames through the fuels, especially the marsh area. It has actually created several spot fires, meaning that flames or embers were carried over into a new area of unburned fuels. So we're dealing with that. The low humidities, normally at night you can have a low intensity burn because the humidity is higher. Not last night, and probably not tonight. The humidity, the relative humidity, is much lower than we were expecting, which makes it hard because the fuels are dry. And so they burn quickly. They're just like torch material. And then right now we're thankfully having a north wind, which has been pushing what we would call a backing fire. I mean, it's the wind. The fire's trying to battle the wind, and so it's a slower creeping fire. But as the wind shifts to come out of the south, there's a potential to have flames pushed further north.
All right. Now, interruption. The mud and rut and all that on the road, you were explaining earlier, this is an issue with fighting the fire.
Yeah. The mud, as you can see, we have mainly tracked vehicles that we use to fight this fire, muskegs, tractors, dozers, all that. But we've had so much rain in the water or in the area that the ground is saturated, but the fuels are dry. So the fire is being carried through the fuels, but when you try to get equipment out there, there's potential to get it stuck and just sink it. Okay. Which puts firefighters at risk. So it's been a battle. Even though it looks wet, it's not wet in the right areas, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Now, how does now? Obviously, this road is closed today, closed to the public. What does the public need to know about what's going on within here?
Yeah, we've closed the road really for public safety and for firefighter safety. It's a narrow road, as you can see on either side. There's water in the ditches. Those ditches tend to be pretty deep, and We also had a few burning snags or dead trees that were on fire, and with the wind and the activity happening in the area, we don't want those falling on the road or on vehicles, especially of the general public. And with the narrowness of the road, having emergency vehicles on here like firefighters, plus additional public using the area, it puts people at risk. And we really want human safety, firefighter safety, everyone, public safety is really our top priority when it comes to wildfires.
Now, the clearing we just passed on the left, what is that? Is it anything?
I believe that might just be a staging area.
Right.
If you look back, there's a curved area. That's one of the fire lines that they put in to break this into smaller units that they can do controlled burns on. And normally when you have those bare open areas, those are used for staging equipment for those prescribed fires.
Okay.
So you have a clear area to let people park and unload equipment.
And as we move forward now on the left, what are we seeing differently than what we've seen on the right a little while ago?
What we saw a little while ago was a very high intensity burn. You can notice when you look back that a lot of the leaves are pretty much gone. It's very barren. This was more of a slower intensity burn. You can see the scorch marks on the trees are not that high in a lot of areas. And so this was just kind of creeping along. This was more of a control situation to burn off a lot of these fuels. But it'll result in different habitats for each side, and it'll be interesting to see within a couple of months, even maybe in a month, what those habitats will start to begin to look like. Yeah, the recovery of this habitat in particular, because it's so adapted to fire, is astronomical. When you come back here and after a rain, give it a week or two, and you'll start seeing green sprouts all over the bottom.
And you talked also about the animals, the benefits to the different wildlife. What?
Yeah. So besides habitat improvement, which by opening up the canopy, the slower canopy, you allow sunlight to hit the ground. It generates more vegetation growth, which feeds a lot more wildlife. But besides all that, the long-term benefits, a lot of animals tend to really like this burned areas, especially right after a burn, because you never know what kind of crispy insects are sitting in there. You tend to notice a lot of birds, especially either immediately after the burn or even a day after the burn, sorting through the burned ashes to find food. It's a great way to find already dead stuff because it doesn't move. But thankfully, most of the wildlife are adapted to this fire habitat, and wildlife loss is really not a very common thing because they're used to moving out of the areas or finding shelter. They really are a lot more savvy than we humans give them credit sometimes.
And we've seen very few properties, people properties, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
For anyone who may be within a half mile or a mile, anything they should be thinking about, especially downwind, depending on the wind direction.
Yeah, especially with smoke. Be aware of smoke. If you have breathing troubles, try to stay out of it as much as possible. And if it's really bothering you, we always suggest maybe finding another area to go to. Especially people with asthma tend to struggle with the smoke in the area. If you start to see fires pop up or smoke columns that weren't originally there, we do suggest calling in to either the Mississippi Forestry Commission or the Alabama Forestry Commission and report those, because of the conditions that we have right now, it's very likely that we could have other wildfires popping up in the area. And one way, if you know you're backed up to a very thick vegetated area, always consider, even if not now, but in the future, clearing vegetation away from your house and creating buffers so that you have room in case there is a wildfire to protect your own structure. Yeah, but that's a nice burn hut.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, intentionally burned out to control.
Yeah, to control the fire interior. The fire originally began off of Grand Batour Road, and it was creeping to the east. Once again, it hit one of our burned areas, which stopped it there for a while, but crept around it. And so we ended up closing it off and setting fire along here to kind of close in on it and not allow it to go any further. Kind of wrap that one up in a nice little package. We did have a spot fire over on the east side, which is how it got onto the other side of the road, and that's why we had to do the structure protection burn, really to protect those structures. So as you can see back here, this is actually a muskeg. That's a tracked vehicle that's used for firefighting. There's a water tank on the back that helps put out spot fires. Those tracks actually help to create a bigger surface area so that it doesn't sink as easily. And you can see the tracks through this area, where a wheeled vehicle would more likely get stuck, especially in this wet, moist habitat. Where back here we have engines. You can see there's a Fish and Wildlife Service muskeg, Forest Service engine. I'm trying to see if there's anyone else in this area but mainly Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service here, but we're also working with Mississippi Forestry Commission and Alabama Forestry Commission. We'll be working with closely tomorrow. The local fire departments have also supplied help, especially with structure protection, so they're included as well. They're mainly stationed at the structures themselves.
Okay.
And then you can also hear the helicopter in the background, and we're using that for reconnaissance, for mapping the area, and really trying to get a handle on how many acres there are. We definitely know, definitely 900 at this point, but more than likely it's going to be more once they do the mapping.
Alan Seals, News 5.